my fellow Americans.
Let's talk about the situation at the border. We've seen a huge surge in migrants crossing the border since January. The number of children in custody higher than it was than its 2019 peak during the Trump administration. Your colleague Veronica Escobar of Texas called the conditions there unacceptable. She was there on Friday. Is she right? What more must be done?
Actually, the facts are these. There are more children, about 600-700 more children, unaccompanied children, coming over the border. This is a humanitarian challenge to all of us. What the administration has inherited is a broken system at the border, and they are working to correct that in the children's interest. I'm so pleased that the president, as a temporary measure, has sent FEMA to the border in order to help facilitate the children going from one 72-hour issue into where they are cared for as they are transferred into family homes or homes that are safe for them to be.
And I have to confess, I knew nothing about their suffering until 2021, when I volunteered to help the Biden administration with the crisis at the southern border. As part of Operation Artemis, I was deployed to the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site in California to help HHS, Office of Refugee Resettlement, reunite children with sponsors in the United States. I thought I was going to help place children in loving homes. Instead, I discovered that children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that begins with recruiting in home country, smuggling to the U.S. border, and ends when ORR delivers a child to a sponsor. Some sponsors are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of the lives of children.
Russia said once they take Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries. That puts America at war. This is about preventing war. It's always been about preventing war. My husband is a combat veteran. He's deployed now. The last thing I want him or any of his military brothers and sisters to do is to go to war.
But I think it is time to give the Ukrainians more help hitting these bases inside Russia.
One of the reasons that the administration has hesitated is because they believe it will escalate things even further with Russia pull the U.S. further in. Why not? Why do you think that's a good idea?
Because it's Russia that has escalated this war. Russia has learned how to pull its forces back out of the range where we have allowed Ukraine to use our weapons and get our support.
American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they've done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III.
A U.S. official has confirmed to CBS News President Biden has given authorization for Kyiv to use U.S.-supplied long-range weapons to strike deep into Russian territory.
I'm sitting here with my father. I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sounds like a shakedown, doesn't it, Director?
I'm not going to get into commenting on that.
You seem deeply uncurious about it, don't you? Almost suspiciously uncurious. Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI does not has no interest in
You won't answer the question about whether or not that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it. Because to the millions of people who will see this, they know it is. And your inability to acknowledge that is deeply revealing about you.
After a long flight from the UK, Julian Assange's day began on the island of Saipan, a tiny territory chosen because it's the closest US court to Australia. This normally quiet courthouse, swarming with reporters, as the WikiLeaks founder arrived flanked by former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd.
Individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
What I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th, yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest.
So what is the threat to democracy? People on both sides, people in power, saying out loud that they want to control what you get to hear and see. It is real, it is a threat, and it is happening and growing. And I'll tell you what, punishing thought is on the agenda. And I just heard it from someone who's not a kook, not Alex Jones, not Tucker Carlson, one of the most sober and intelligent politicians of our time, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
I think it's important to indict the Russians, just as Mueller indicted a lot of Russians who were engaged in direct election interference and boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrent.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg admitted that the Biden administration repeatedly pressured Meta to censor content, including information about Hunter Biden, and Zuck admitted that he also regrets complying with these demands. In a letter to the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Representative Jim Jordan, Zuck writes, quote, "The FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 election. That fall, when we saw a New York Post story reporting on Joe Biden's family, we sent that story to fact checkers for review and temporarily demoted it."
You know, you do some tweets that seem to be, or at least give support to some who would call others conspiracy theories.
Well, yes, but I mean, honestly, you know, some of these conspiracy theories have turned out to be true.
Which ones?
Well, like the Hunter Biden laptop.
That's true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am in awe of Ms. Jankowicz. When the department picked her, did it know that she had said that Mr. Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation? Did it know that she had vouched for the veracity of the Steele dossier?
Senator, let me repeat myself and add an additional fact. One, we do not discuss internal hiring processes.
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you to guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech.
To be a conspiracy theorist is to have been right all along, despite the efforts of the paid-for liars. And it's also to be demonstrably well ahead of the gullible, still believing in smoke and mirrors. Conspiracy theorist was first used by the CIA to shut down those who doubted the official line about the murder of John F. Kennedy, that fishy old tale about a lone shooter and a magic bullet, and then that lone shooter being shot by another lone shooter before he could talk. That was in the 1960s, and from then, the label conspiracy theorist worked for decades as the means to make thinking people too scared to speak when they smelt a rat. Let 2024 be the year of clearing out the rubbish, the trash, the long overdue year when the past or sell-by-date labels, conspiracy theorist among them, are cast into the dustbin of history.
Well, wake up, everybody. Welcome into Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. The mainstream media is actively spinning what is happening in Gaza right now. Is a ceasefire about to collapse? It seems like it's all been orchestrated. We're going to talk about that. Benjamin Netanyahu releasing a message yesterday and sort of moving the goalpost on a ceasefire agreement. Colonel Douglas Macgregor is going to be here to talk about that, plus big news out of Ukraine.
Yes, the United States is admitting that moving the border of Ukraine is an impossible goal, and they want peace now. I'm losing my mind that we have our government admitting this. This is something we've been talking about and asking for 3 years now. So we're going to talk about what's happening with that.
We're also going to talk about ICE requesting a lot more money to secure the border, and trying to pull out strings with the IRS, using IRS agents. They're demanding now is multiple billions of dollars to secure the southern border. Again, Colonel Douglas Macgregor has been open about this idea. It needs to be a military operation. So maybe now that awareness is dawning on Washington, D.C. So we're going to get to all of that and more today on your Wednesday. Good to see all of you guys here. Hey, we should tell you we have a daily newsletter. We had hundreds of you sign up for it yesterday. It's totally free. Just go to redacted.inc and you can sign up. It's delivered to your inbox first thing in the morning, and Natalie works hard on writing it and delivered to your inbox. You can read it over your cup of coffee first thing in the morning, covering about 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day that the mainstream media largely ignores. So again, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free Redacted newsletter right now.
Do that.
All right, let's talk about this. Well, the ceasefire in Gaza is getting closer to collapse. Why is that happening? Well, Israel's own media now confirming that Israel has violated the terms of the ceasefire, not Hamas. Even the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, confirmed to Israeli media that they have violated the terms of the ceasefire. Again, this is not like propaganda. They are telling us that this has happened. So why the hell is Benjamin Netanyahu then suddenly releasing a video message making demands that were not a part of the original ceasefire agreement, moving the goalpost? Watch.
סיימתי כעת דיון מעמיק של 4 שעות בקבינט המדיני-ביטחוני. כולנו הבנו תרעומת מהמצב המזעזע של 3 חטופינו ששוחררו בשבת האחרונה. כולנו גם בירכנו על הדרישה של הנשיא טראמפ לשחרור חטופינו עד שבת בצהריים, וכולנו גם בירכנו על החזון המהפכני של הנשיא לעתיד עזה.
So in many ways, leaning on President Trump's comments the other day that all hostages better be released by this weekend or all hell was going to break loose. And so Netanyahu sort of jumping on that. It all doesn't really make sense at all unless this has all been planned for many, many months. And we're just along for all of the theater right now. Let's bring in Colonel Douglas Macgregor, one of the sharpest inside minds on all of this, to talk about this. Colonel, good to see you. What do you make of this sort of moving of the goalpost here? Is this all theater?
No, and it's not unusual for the Israelis if you go back through history. They frequently violate ceasefires when they think it's in their interest to do so, and they make no apologies for it. So I don't think anybody's surprised. Having said that, there was never any expectation among serious people that this ceasefire, as weak as it was, because they're still in Lebanon, South Lebanon, they're violating this thing all over the place, would ever last beyond the first phase. The assumption was that this was a pause that was in the interests of the Israeli Defense Force, particularly the ground troops, that the Hamas organization and the Palestinians would go along it, obviously, because they need aid trucks. But out of the 8,000 plus trucks, only about 4,000, or I think it's that 4,000 or 5,000 have actually gotten into Gaza. So that hasn't worked all that well. So I think this was predictable. And now that President Trump has made his strident threat, I simply think that they're going to make virtue of necessity, because their plan was always to return to the war of destruction in Gaza. And I think what we're going to witness, sadly, is a return to just that, bombing, heavy bombing, and the movement of some ground forces carefully, cautiously into areas that have been severely bombed. And I don't know what happens to the population that's now gone north to try and reclaim lost territory. They're very much at risk. And remember, we just delivered enormous quantities of 2,000-pound bombs. And in addition to that, this mother of all bombs, which delivers the equivalent of a 10-kiloton warhead. I mean, anything's possible, and I fear the worst.
Well, I have a question. Now, President Trump has stuck his neck out to be an ally for Israel and said, with Netanyahu sitting right next to him, Gaza's a hell because they bomb the hell out of them. Well, Netanyahu sat right there, but he still, like I said, stuck his neck out to defend Israel. Shouldn't this violation of the ceasefire be an embarrassment to President Trump? Do you think that there's any other way to see it? And will Trump see it this way?
I'm not sure how President Trump sees it. I fear that his view is that it doesn't matter. He's committed unconditionally to Israel. This is something that became very, very clear early on. Go back to the Republican convention. And remember this speech that was given with this giant Israeli flag behind that said Israel first. And I think it's very clear that if you were going to serve in this administration, you had to sign on for the Israel first agenda. And that's what he's implementing. Now, the bad news here, Natalie, is that we poisoned the well in the Middle East. Virtually nobody trusts us. Everybody thinks that we're the enemy. They all know that without us, without our willingness to underwrite the Israelis and provide the equipment and bombs to them, nothing would happen. And we are still the reason, I think, that everyone has exercised restraint. I include the Iranians, and I think that also applies to some extent to the Turks, because what's going on right now is almost a universal coalescing of Islamic states against Israel and the United States.
You know, talk about these allies and how spoiled it's become. The King of Jordan visited Trump yesterday and sat there next to him. And it seemed like the Trump administration was sort of speaking on behalf of the Jordanians. And then they came out today and had to sort of clarify the position that Jordan was going to go along with the removal of all Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. But Jordan seemed to come out and walk that back and say that's not what we want at all. What do you make of the Jordanian position right now?
Well, the Jordanian government said that if large numbers of Palestinians were forced out of Israel and into Jordan, that Jordan would declare war against Israel. So I think that's the story. What the Jordanians agreed to do is to take some 2,000 severely injured or ill children into Jordan to put into hospitals and so forth from Gaza. And of course, remember that you have General Sisi, who also met with President Trump, and he made it very clear that it's an impossibility. He's got a large part of the Egyptian army mobilized and now sitting on the border with Gaza and Israel. So I think the region is poised for a regional war. It'll begin somewhere in that vicinity, and it'll spread rapidly.
So do you think, final question on Israel, is this ceasefire finished? Are we about to see a lot more bloodshed?
Yes. And I think this will trigger the regional war. You're talking, you heard President Trump, he accurately described Gaza. He said it looks like a demolition site. Now, in the meantime, we provide all these munitions, and the Israelis say they're going to return to the destruction of Gaza. They're going to wage that war. In fact, President Trump also said that he would back the annexation of the West Bank to Israel. That means more mass murder and expulsion for the Palestinians that live on the West Bank. Where else can this be headed but to a regional war? Because at some point, and I think it's close, everyone in the region is going to say, that's it, no further. And they're all going to coalesce. And that's why I worry about not just Iran, but also Turkey. The Turks now share a border with Israel. Let's be frank. Erdogan calls the tune in Syria.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's running the show in Syria.
Right. Well, let's pivot to talk about Ukraine, something that you, I want to say, have been right about all along. Now, President Trump says that he has spoken with Russian President Putin, and they are discussing a resolution to the war. He does not say he's going to check with Zelensky in this post. He says he will tell Zelensky. Just today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says that a peace deal will not involve Russia giving back the territory of the people who voted to join Russia. I want to play this clip and then get your reaction, if you will.
We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops.
All right. So now that we have demasculized Zelensky, what do you think happens next?
I think President Trump is increasingly aware that Zelensky is simply a crook and a criminal. I think probably, Musk and others have probably told him about the billions of dollars stolen that have now shown up in bank accounts outside of Ukraine. And I think President Trump said, look, we're not going to reverse the gains of the Russians. The borders are going to have to change. Well, that's one good step in the right direction. However, the rest of these comments that were made have no chance of happening. The Russians want Ukraine to be neutral, but they're not interested in foreign forces on Ukrainian soil. And I don't think they're going to acquiesce in that. I'd be very surprised if they did. There is still this lingering notion of some sort of separation that's going to be policed by troops. I don't think the Russians are going to be very interested in that either. So, and then finally, and this is very important, I'm glad President Trump is going to talk directly to Putin. Thus far, until now, he hasn't. He talked through an intermediary. So now we have direct communication. And he's going to go to Moscow, I think. Peskov seemed to indicate as much. If he does that, that's a good thing, but he's got to go in there understanding certain things. The Russians are going to continue to fight and advance as long as there is any life left in the Ukrainian army. In other words, they're not stopping. You can negotiate all you want, but they're going to continue to move forward. And that's because the Russians have always said what they wanted. They want the aid to stop, and that has to stop. Our aid to the Ukrainians is what's keeping things moving, cash and weapons. That has to stop. And once it stops, the Europeans will bail out because they don't have the wherewithal to do any of this on their own. Everybody knows that. So that has to happen. The other thing is we've got to get out of Ukraine. I'm talking about Americans who are on the ground there, not just the Europeans. All of us have got to get out. Now, the Russians are going to insist on that, I'm sure, privately. And hopefully President Trump will respond to it because, and here is the important point, Natalie, Clayton, we have no leverage over the Russians. None.
And so, yeah, we're going to dictate some sort of a peacekeeping force from NATO that's going to be on the ground there. They'll never go for it, as you've pointed out many, many times. And the government of Ukraine, of course, the CIA placed a Western-backed puppet government there in 2014. So Putin is not going to go along with like Zelensky light, right? There's going to have to be a Russian, maybe sympathetic government in Ukraine, no?
Of course, absolutely. I mean, there's no question about it. And the Austrian State Treaty, which I've mentioned many times before, is a good example. And that could be a good model for Ukraine. And the Russians, at least for the first 10 years after 1955, maintained a delegation in Vienna. And they had senior officials sit on the Austrian National Defense Council. And that was to ensure that there was no interest in revanchism. In other words, no interest in harming Russians or attacking Russia. So I think you'll have something similar in Ukraine. But we have to ask ourselves, and this is something that President Trump needs to decide, what do we want with Russia, not just from Russia? And I think the answer to that is peace and prosperity. We have no interest in destroying Russia. They have no interest in destroying us. Let's get out of that straitjacket. Let's dump it. Trump had no part in that. That's all Biden and his friends. So President Trump has a brilliant opportunity to make a clean sweep and start over fresh with Russia, and we need to. We should be cooperating, not fighting.
Well, you've been right many, many times, and people who've been paying attention to you for many, many years know that to be the case. I want to point out that you're launching a new show, so we would love to promote your new. So here is a little promo you guys
now in the marketplace with you, Clayton.
That's right. I think you'll win, probably.
Let's
clearly.
do it.
Here's a new promo. So let's roll this promo. Watch this.
If you keep advancing, we'll have to use a nuclear weapon. The use of any nuclear weapon is going to precipitate escalation very rapidly. Our people must be well informed with the truth for us to make educated decisions. It's time to take our nation back.
All right, that launches March 11th. So
congratulations. I don't see that as competing with us. We're always better off when the marketplace of ideas is robust. So welcome to the
welcome to
we
the
got to
fight.
find somebody like you, Natalie, to come on the show to keep everybody interested, you know. We don't have anybody like you yet.
All right,
No,
I'll clone myself.
Okay, well, that would be great. It's twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday for 1 hour in the afternoon, I suspect. And eventually, you know, these episodes, as they pile up, they will be available on all platforms, but initially only on Republic. And that's the social media platform, republic.us. You can find that easily. This is going to be a take no prisoners operation. We want the truth, and that's what we're going to look for. And we're going to try to provide it to Americans, and we're going to bring on a lot of Americans to talk to us. And I'm not just talking about celebrities, you know. We'll have some of those. But we want real people. And we want to find out what's really happening and talk about it.
Well, that's why we love having you on our show, because you don't pull any punches. And if someone doesn't like you because their worldview gets shaken up from time to time, that's a good thing, going after the truth. So, Colonel, we always love having you here on the show. Congratulations on the launch of the new show. We'll be watching it. And thanks so much for your insights, as always, Colonel. Thanks.
Hey, thank you both. Bye-bye.
All right, we got a lot more news to get to here on your Wednesday. We're going to look at ICE requiring more funding, and we're getting to the heart of some of these catch and release now. I mean, you have a new the stories coming out about these individuals who've been on ICE radar under the Biden administration, and they've had their hands tied, not able to send them out of the country, has been devastating. And now repeat offenders. We have Houston Police Department looking for a new guy who was just groping a little girl. But he's had multiple times he's been arrested. Illegal alien. And ICE knew about him last year under the Biden administration. He's out running free again, groping little girls. We're going to talk about that when we come back. But first,
we want to remind you that Redacted is brought to you by Ramp, because, of course, a large part of managing a business finances is tedious, repetitive work to make sure that you have accurate bookkeeping. Well, Ramp can help you with that. They streamline this work, giving business operators more time to focus on what matters the most. Now, most likely, if you run a small business, you're thinking, oh, crap, it's tax time. Do I have my ducks in a row? Well, if you're using Ramp, you would have your ducks in a row. Every month when the month closes, you would be able to look at last month's spending and finances, see where you've been to predict where you're going to go and plan to get there. And then you would be ready to file your taxes, because it would all be done in real time. Not only that, but Ramp has individual cards that you can issue to your employees and set limits and get monitoring on their spending, which is super important. So you need to try them out. Check it out at ramp.com/redacted. When you do, you'll get $250 off when you join Ramp. One more time, that's ramp.com/redacted, and you'll get $250 off. Ramp will help you manage all your finance operations in one place, make it easier so you can see all your business spending, plan where to go, and grow your business easier. One more time, that's ramp.com/redacted.
Well, the Trump administration has requested $175 billion from Congress to hire more ICE agents. Should we give it to them? I mean, let us know in the comments below. I mean, we send $175 billion to Ukraine. So what about more ICE agents? And they want to expand their detention facilities. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, stated that ICE cannot increase deportations without additional funding. Meanwhile, Houston police are looking for this guy. Here's a scumbag, Carlos Jose Aya Morales, this animal accused of groping a young Houston girl last week. He was let out early. But here's the thing. Houston police now says that this illegal has a long history of similar crimes dating back to 2014. He was released to ICE on February 22nd, 2024. And here, look at here, some like Ring doorbell footage of this guy going after a little girl. Disgusting. And the Biden administration basically let him go. So now he's committed another crime. And this is not surprising at all to the United States. The author of the book Agent Under Fire, it's called A Murder and a Manifesto. It's written by former ICE Special Agent Victor Avila. And he knows all about what ICE needs right now. And Victor joins us now on the show. Victor, good to see you. Welcome to Redacted.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
So does ICE need $175 billion to do its job?
They do. It's multifaceted. It's just not removals. Remember, it's all of the immigration enforcement and customs. And you forget the custom. A lot of people forget the customs side that needs the funding as well. And we're talking about any violation that has a nexus to our border. That's the illegal movement of people and goods, drugs, and counterfeit, counter-proliferation investigations, you name it. And so they do. And then we're not just going to need personnel like you're seeing right now from other agencies that we're basically borrowing from DEA, now IRS, and others. But there's a lot of intricate parts that need to be moved and I think fixed on the internal side of ICE enforcement removal operations. In the last 2 decades or so, probably even longer than that, the processing of an individual that's here illegally has just become so cumbersome that it used to be simple processing, get this person out, let's go. And they started adding provisions and add this information. And that is, before you know it, it takes, 2-3 hours or even longer sometimes to process one individual. And I mean process out for deportation or removal. Not all of them are deportations. Most of them, as a matter of fact, are removals. So that's one aspect, the enforcement, the equipment, and the going out to the street, what you've been seeing in the news lately. The other part is the bed space and the facilities that need to be built. We have some space, and they're creating some as we speak, but we're going to need a lot more. What President Trump is asking for is you got to have the bed space before you even make contact with the body, because where are you going to put the body if a county jail is not going to accept them because they're full? So there's a lot of moving parts here that come together. And yes, of course, the budget and the funding is one of those.
Well, nobody wants to see us treating these immigrants like animals and putting them in a dog cell, not with no food, no shower, nothing like that, right? So we do want to have the ability to treat them humanely. A pro-immigration group called American Immigration Council estimated last year, when they were trying to scare us about this, that a mass deportation would cost at least $315 billion. But in 2023, the migrant crisis cost $150 billion just to maintain it. So that money would be made back in 2 years. That's an opportunity cost, wouldn't you say? So how do you explain that to people who are against deportations?
Yeah, you got to give them both sides, right? You got to give them, first of all, the economic impact in our economy from illegal immigration. And it's huge. And the 3 major ones that I cite all the time, it's the criminal justice system, huge one, the healthcare system, and the education system. I live in Texas, and Texas alone is paying billions with a B of dollars to educate illegal alien children in our state. And that just amounts when you start adding state after state. But I agree with you. This is humanitarian. And I just want the administration to do what the prior administration did. They allowed millions of people to come here illegally, and they did it humanitarianly and with compassionate. I want to do it the same way. I want to do it with compassion, humanitarian, except it's going to be the other way out, back to their home country. And we can do that. The difference is that not a lot of them want to leave, especially the criminal aliens and Tren de Aragua and gang members and cartel members. By the way, there's a lot of cartel members that are also illegal aliens. And so they need to be captured, and they're not going to go down easy, and they're not going to just give themselves up like we're used to seeing. And then the fight that's happening on the other side with the cartels, something's about to happen there. Let me tell you, they right now, the border's literally shut down for them, and they're desperately wanting to move the fentanyl and the people into our country. They still want to continue to do that, and it's become very difficult. And so something's got to give.
Do you think there's going to be a shooting match, that we're going to go to war with the drug cartels? I mean, you see the videos coming out of Mexico. They are armed to the teeth. I mean, I tweeted about it yesterday. I mean, they're full armor vehicles, massive amounts of weapons. I mean, this isn't some little group. This is a massively armed, this is an army.
It's a militia.
It's a highly sophisticated networks. That's what they are. And thank you for referring to them, that they're not small gangs. And these guys have money. And because they have money, they have power and they have the equipment. Now, if you want to make a comparison with the U.S. military, it absolutely stand no chance. But it doesn't mean that they don't fight. It doesn't mean that they can't shoot down one of our helicopters. They definitely have the capabilities to do that. But if they bring it on to the United States government and our military, I'm not going to go as far as saying there's going to be an all-out war, because I don't even think there'll be a one. I think we're just going to go out there and wipe them out if they attempt to do that. There's already shootings at our Border Patrol agents. That happens all the time. I think there's going to be a different type of escalation that is a direct result of what's happening right now.
Does the Mexican government have any ability to join in this fight? Because I have family in Mexico. I know that law enforcement stands down when it comes to the cartels. So if something like this were to happen, Mexico does have an army. Do they have the ability and desire?
Cojones?
Yeah, the ganas. You know what I'm saying? To do something like this.
So listen, I lived in Mexico. I worked there, and I'll tell you first, one side of it, the citizens of Mexico are fed up with this. They're sick and tired of the crime. They're sick and tired of the corruption. You know what they're sick and tired of is the extortion. You have a small business, and here you go. You open a small business, starts making a little bit of money. Here comes a knock on the door from a cartel member asking for a percentage every month or every week. That happens in an entirety of the whole country of Mexico. They're sick and tired of it. Every truck that crosses that border, and that 18-wheeler, is getting extorted for a minimum of $200 to $350 each. And then they're going straight to the plant and saying, extorting the manager of the plant, saying, might as well pay up for the trucks that are going to be up there, because they're going to either pay out on the road or you're going to pay right here. So that's we have the, believe me, the citizens of Mexico, they want us, the United States, to go there and help them. Now the government and the corruption of the government and the cartels and involvement and entanglement is a different story. You're gonna hear the Mexican government oppose. One of the things they love saying is, we're not gonna allow the United States to come here and violate our sovereignty, blah, blah, blah. I've heard it so many times. It's always our fault. We're the ones that use fentanyl. We're the ones that give them the firearm, all that. I've heard it many, many years in my career. But underneath that public persona they're gonna put up, I think they actually do want our help, but the separation between the government and the cartel right now is very difficult, because the cartels are running a parallel government in Mexico. Look at the war that's going on in Sonora on the other side of Arizona, and the other war on the other side of Texas, in Laredo, Texas, on a daily shootouts. You watch these videos, you think these shootouts are in Iraq, and they're not. They're right here next to us. So there has to be a cooperation. There is no other option. Mexico is going to have to say yes. Now, they've sent the 10,000 National Guards, Mexican National Guard, to the border. I'm not sure exactly where they're placing them, but I hope they put them mostly in New Mexico, Arizona, and California, because Texas is pretty fortified, let me tell you. Not only do we have the National Guard, we have the Border Patrol, we have Texas DPS troopers. We're pretty good. El Paso's still a hot area, so I wouldn't mind to see some there. But the Mexican National Guard, a lot of them are compromised. Not everyone. They have good soldiers too. But I get sent all these videos of them using drugs while they're on the line, and all these corruption type of videos, and that's unfortunately what you have to deal with in Mexico. But the bottom line is, they have to say yes, so we can go in there. And I'm not talking about going there with military intervention. Some might have to be to take out the super labs that, where they make the fentanyl and the methamphetamine in Mexico. And we got to put a dent to these cartels. One is by taking their money. They're already declared FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations. So we're going to strip them of their assets, properties, money, whatever they have, bank accounts. But then we actually have to stop that supply and destroy these labs. And eventually, there's going to be violence. It's just the way it's going to happen. There's going to be violence because these guys have absolutely no regard for human life. They don't care whatsoever.
Yeah.
Former ICE Special Agent Victor Avila, we appreciate you joining us from the great state of Texas today as we watch this happen and see if Congress actually approves this money. Maybe instead of sending the $200 billion to Ukraine, we could actually fund our own country and protect our own borders. Victor, great to see you today. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
You know, he makes an excellent point that I had not considered. We can freeze the bank accounts of Russians just for being Russian.
Right.
Not for having anything to do with the war in Ukraine just because they're Russian. Cartels, we don't have the ability to do that.
We don't do anything.
We don't have anybody who can get involved in that.
Yeah, we know where their funding is. We know where they live, for crying out loud. We've known. That's why ICE was able to swoop in as soon as Trump was elected or inaugurated and go right into these different gang member areas inside the United States. So, yeah. All right, make America great again instead of making other countries great again. All right, we've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. We're going to look at this HPV vaccine because, wow, it's amazing that a company colluded with the FDA to hide damaging vaccine information from the American public. Oh, boy, wait until you hear this story. This one now is about Merck. So we're going to look at that today on the show. And also all of this discussion about President Trump putting in these executive orders, and Democrats are saying this is extra constitutional. This violates the Constitution. Is that really the case? We're going to talk about that on the show today as well. But first,
we want to remind you that Redacted is brought to you by the Tax Network USA. The IRS, you know, is the largest collection agency in the world, and it has stepped up its enforcement for 2025. So if you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns, well, you might be getting stressed about the upcoming April deadline. So have someone on your side who is an advocate who can help you deal with the IRS. You should not deal with them alone. And in fact, never contact them alone. You should turn it over to someone who understands the process, like Tax Network USA. Why? Because not all tax resolution companies are the same. Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line to the IRS. That means they know which agents to deal with and which not to. Like our friend Tom Wheelwright says, you got to treat them nice because they hold a lot of power. Tax Network USA has experience in that. They have proven strategies that are designed to settle your tax problems in your favor, whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million. Their attorneys and negotiators have resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. So talk with one of their tax strategists. It's totally free. You can stop the threatening letters, stop looking over your shoulder. That's so stressful. Handle this. Have someone help you handle this. Call them at 1-800-958-1000 for a free consultation, or visit tnusa.com/redacted. One more time, that's tnusa.com/redacted.
Someone in the chat was like, I knew Natalie was Mexican. She's not Mexican.
No, my sister is married into a Mexican.
Yeah,
I am Spanish. That's why I'm a lot of things. But
Hawaiian, Italian.
My mom is Hawaiian and Spanish, and my father's Italian.
Yeah,
I'm a pineapple pizza.
Born in California, so not Mexican. Yeah. All right. Stop me if you've heard this one before. A big pharma company knew that it had a defective, dangerous vaccine and didn't do anything to stop it from hitting the market. Newly released classified documents in the landmark lawsuit against Merck reveal that Merck and the FDA knew the vaccine maker didn't conduct proper testing for DNA contamination, but instead they covered it up. Sound familiar? Dr. Joseph Verone is a former chief of critical care and COVID-19 unit at the United Memorial Medical Center and joins us now to talk about this. So I'm shocked, doctor, to see that gambling has been going on in this establishment. The collusion between the FDA and Merck to hide these DNA particles inside of this vaccine. Were you stunned to learn this?
Well, I mean, I wasn't, because as you know, we have gone through hell over the last 4 years. Some of us who initially believed that vaccines were safe and effective, now we have come and realized that nope, they are not safe, and definitely some of them are not effective. So when I learned about this, particularly about this lawsuit, and I started to learn that there was contamination of these vaccines with the DNA of the actual virus that causes cervical cancer, I said, what the hell is going on? So I wasn't impressed anymore, because we have gone through all of this for so many years. Now, I'm glad that this is at least being brought to the attention of people that are firm believers of whatever is displayed in an advertisement on TV every night.
Right.
So the HPV vaccine, interestingly enough, was recently changed its recommendation from 2 to 1. Now, we know that there's very little science to have ever recommended 2 or 1, much like the COVID vaccine. So do you think this is related? And do you think that maybe we will eventually get some kind of clinical trials to behind our recommended vaccine dosages?
Well, if we can get a little transparency from these companies, I think we're going to be okay. I am not at the moment where I can tell you use or not use these particular vaccines. I will tell you, for example, for COVID, I will tell you, do not use them no matter what. I mean, that's simple. But for things like HPV, I want to see more data. And
me too.
Now that you're hearing that, this particular HPV vaccine has been infected or let's call it has impurities, including DNA from the HPV virus itself, sitting on them. And this has been going on for almost a decade. I mean, that is scary. I would not want to give that to my kids. So that I did give this vaccine to my kids years ago when we were told that these were, quote, safe and effective.
So I guess for our audience or myself, who's unclear what it means to be infected with DNA, and they covered this up and hid this from us. What exactly does that mean, infected with DNA?
Well, it depends on the DNA that you're getting. So there are two things on this one. First of all, this DNA gets bound to the aluminum that is given in the vaccines. And that makes this DNA resistant to your own system of cleaving or getting rid of particles that shouldn't be in your body. So what it does, it keeps it in your system and it gives you a series of inflammatory reactions. And people have this inflammation everywhere, and they can have something that's called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And in some cases, there have been even cases of sudden death. So you don't want something that will be giving you an inflammatory process in your system, because you are going to get in trouble if that happens.
Now, people have been saying for a long time that their, especially teenage daughters, have had symptoms that even looked a little bit like, I have a friend who wrote in her book that it felt like her daughter had some sort of Lyme disease even, and behavioral products. And she couldn't get answers. And so there's nobody, unfortunately right now, we have very little answers for what happened. So what is the recourse for people who have had adverse events from something like this now that we have this revelation?
And the problem is that there is no recourse that you currently have. First, you have to have a healthcare professional that thinks about it, because not all of them are going to think, oh, this is probably a reaction to this vaccine. Second, how are you going to prove it? That gets to be extremely difficult. Third, you need to look at what can I do from a legal standpoint, because, again, all of these vaccines are protected, quote unquote, but they don't deserve to be protected, especially if they were concealing information from us. If indeed Merck and the FDA were aware of these significant side effects that individuals can have, then that is malice. That is gross negligence, and that needs to be punishable.
It's deeply disturbing. Are you hopeful that we'll have under RFK Jr. more transparency? I mean, he was grilled by Congress. Basically, they, of course, trying to protect the biopharmaceutical complex. Many of them, Elizabeth Warren and others, Bernie Sanders, they'd received a lot of money from Big Pharma. He kind of walked a delicate fence line there during his confirmation hearings. But are you hopeful that we'll start to get some more transparency here about the testing and trials and what's actually going into these vaccines?
I think that if RFK fully gets the confirmation and people truly look at where we are and where can we be, I think that we will at least be able to know what's going on. And like I said earlier, I want data. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not telling people don't get vaccinated except for COVID vaccines. But for the other vaccines, I want to see the data. I want to know why, for example, the Amish population that doesn't get vaccinated, they don't get autism, for example. I want to know. I want to know what is going on there. Are we missing something? And then once I have that data, then I will explain that to my patients, and I'll tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly, and empower them to make the whatever decision they want to make. So that's the most important thing. I think that with RFK, we are going to be able to get to that point if, he doesn't have a resistance, or if somebody doesn't try to kill him for all of this.
Right. Well,
I mean, I'm
there's a
serious.
long
I mean,
history.
It's literally the plot of The Fugitive.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very serious.
Yeah.
I mean, I get very concerned because this man is bringing up information that is very scary for some companies. And if he truly finds out that this has been going on and it's not just a mistake that, oops, we screwed up, but it's something that was done and these people consciously disregarded the well-being of people, I mean, trust me, he probably has a couple of snipers on his head at this point.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and his family has a history of that, so this is not out of the blue.
Yeah.
And we know from whistleblowers who've come forward in other related areas have wound up dead in their car and just as they're about to testify. So, he's up against a behemoth, a massive. It's probably larger, in fact, than the military-industrial complex in the United States, the biopharmaceutical complex in the United States, and they definitely do not like him very much. Dr. Joseph Varone is the former chief of critical care and COVID-19 unit at United Memorial Medical Center, and he's been outspoken about the COVID-19 vaccine, and a lot of states now moving towards maybe banning this altogether. So, Dr. Varone, thanks for fighting the good fight and keeping them honest. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much.
My mother, she said, when I was talking to her about corruption in big pharma and all of that, she said, you know what? I believed it after I saw The Fugitive. I'm like, you've believed that since the 90s? She said, yes. So it's not all the research, all the news. It's The Fugitive that convinced her. So.
Well, Novi Hora says, Natalie, true. The Fugitive was David Jansen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm telling you, rewatch that. He gets framed. I'm sorry I gave that away.
Don't
I think there's like a 20-year.
There's a moratorium. I think.
It's been way too long. It's been way too long for you to.
What year
to
did The Fugitive come out?
Well, the show, there was the television show, The Fugitive, and then the movie was updated with the sort of biopharmaceutical angle to it, if I'm not mistaken.
1993.
Yeah,
okay.
I love that movie.
So, I'm not going to apologize for
I, as a nerd, have that on Laserdisc.
Do you?
Yes.
I just added it to our family
And
movie.
a little side note about that, the first side of the first disc on Laserdisc is, I think, the Criterion edition where you can freeze it like frame by frame by frame, because that whole train sequence, like you want to be able to see it frame by frame because it's such a cool sequence.
Yeah.
We need to watch that as a family.
I just put it on our family. Our middle daughter cannot take suspense. She will jump out of her skin.
Love it. All right,
for that reason alone.
We've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday that does not include movies. But hey, maybe we should do a movie wrap-up show someday because I'm a big movie fan. Okay, we're going to talk about the constitutionality of the executive orders that President Trump has been putting in place. Democrats are crying foul. How can he do this? How can Elon Musk be standing inside the Oval Office? Who elected him? Forgetting, of course, that the President of the United States gets to pick his own staff to carry out his own executive branch duties, but nevertheless, don't let facts get in the way. Lionel Nation is going to be here to talk all about that in a moment. But first, we want to tell you about our friends at Hillsdale College, because one of my favorite traditions is choosing some New Year's resolutions. You know, my birthday is on New Year's Eve, so I get to sort of pick what I want to do for the year and kind of lay out my goals. And we all get to start fresh, set new goals, tackle new and exciting challenges. And February is hard because maybe you've set some things for the year and you're already rolling them back. Well, you know what? Now is the time to get off your duff and learn something new. And Hillsdale College offers more than 40 free online courses. And maybe this year you said to yourself, you know, I want to educate myself a little bit more about the Constitution, the United States Constitution, or maybe the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. And are we seeing similarities right now, what's happening in the West as this globalist domination is starting to crumble? What does that look like compared to Rome? You can take their course on that. It's all free. So it really fantastic. I really love the Roman one. I have to be honest with you. There's so much. I think a lot of people talk about the fall of the Roman Empire and they really don't understand how it happened. And it's such a great course. So go to Hillsdale College right now /redacted. It's hillsdale.edu/redacted to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. Over 40 free courses right now. So if you've got a little extra time, instead of watching some Netflix or whatever, you know, wasting time, take a course, learn about the U.S. Constitution or C.S. Lewis or the Book of Genesis or the fall of the Roman Empire. Go to hillsdale.edu/redacted to enroll for free. That's hillsdale.edu/redacted.
Well, Democrats are freaking out that what President Trump is doing with his executive orders and his orders to slash the federal government budget and personnel is a constitutional crisis. Their argument is that he does not have the power to, say, close a federal agency or choke off their budgets or offer people early retirement or a furlough. They keep going to the courts to stop his orders, and they are largely getting their way with stays, meaning that the judges are ordering the president to either stop or fight this in court. Well, Lionel is going to join us today. He is going to discuss this from the Lionel Nation YouTube channel. He's a prosecutor and a constitutional expert, and he will break it down for us. So, Lionel, yes or no, does the president have the constitutional right to do this?
Absolutely, 100%. And they're not even claiming he doesn't. They're asking for a temporary restraining order. Think of it as a Hail Mary, just anything. So normally what a judge will do is they'll say, can you show me irreparable harm, some immediate damage, something that we have to stop or theoretically cease what is happening? Yes, okay, we'll stop this. We'll look at this. I'll give you until Friday, and then all of this is going to go bye-bye because it is absolutely, positively within the purview, constitutional and otherwise, of Article 2 jurisdiction for the president to do this. Now, what I'd like you two great folks to remember is during World War II, there was an incredible group of people who cracked the Enigma code. You might have remembered this. This was Alan Turing. And they went and they took housewives and people who liked crossword puzzles and just regular folks that they enlisted. Now, this was, of course, the military, but this has been going on since the beginning of time. If you have a particular expertise in something, you can be hired, deputized, officiated. You can be an agent of the government. There is nothing at all. What is the difference between, I'm not kidding, Elon Musk and an FBI agent? Nothing. He's appointed. So this is going nowhere. It is, and the very fact, dear friends, that they are screaming, it goes back to that adage, you only take flack when you're over the target. So keep up the great work.
AOC, of course, there's sound bites have been resurrected of her. I'm sure you saw this week where she was shouting, basically telling President Biden, basically ignore the courts, ignore the courts. And so that might come back to bite her in the behind because now they're playing the same sort of lawfare in reverse. So should President Trump and his administration simply ignore the courts? Can they do that?
Well, not ignore them, but this isn't going anywhere. This is going to be just a temporary. In fact, one of the judges had a very interesting question or a point. They said, if you're talking about immediately ceasing and eliminating and interrupting, let's say, payments to members of a particular agency, that might prove problematic. And the judge quipped. He said, it's one thing for you to shut down an operation in Syria versus Bethesda. So, yeah, maybe that's a very good point. But the president is saying, look, I've got 1,000 things going on at the same time. We will wait for you to deal with this. But afterwards, no court is going to be able to basically say you have to dismantle DOJ. Now, here's the question for you two. If you are are these judges corrupt? Let's really get down to it. Are these lefties, are these Obama appointed, are they corrupt? If I'm a corrupt judge and I'm some guy who just slipped in and maybe I've got a daughter working for, the education department and I'm like one of these New York judges, I'm one of those folks whose daughter is paid millions to campaign and to politic for whatever. What can I do? Well, I can do a lot to a point, but here's the worst part. I am granted so much leeway that is not illegal. Remember, look what our lawfare just put this president through. We had the Supreme Court who came up in the Griswold case in 1965 and created privacy. What people don't understand is if I'm crazy, I mean a nut, and I am evil and crazy and a lefty, and I want to use the Constitution or the law to hurt or to harm, I have absolute, almost plenary leeway to do it because I'm given so much discretion. A judge could sit there and say, I think Doge should be shut down. And then they got to wait, and then they're going to go to a court of appeals, and then the court of appeals is going to do it. But here's the good part. This is very important. The court, the president, does not have to necessarily stop while he addresses the case. During the Vietnam War, there were some cases. I think William O. Douglas was one of the justices who ruled that a particular bombing plan or something that the government was doing, that Nixon was doing, was wrong. They didn't stop the war. They didn't stop military action while the Supreme Court figured this thing out. They can say, I'll take this under advisement, but that doesn't necessarily mean things cease. So the good news is, don't worry about this. Don't worry about this.
Doesn't seem that Trump is worried very much, right?
No.
Yeah, he seems to not be lashing out. He doesn't. He just keeps going. I have a question, though.
Yes,
go ahead.
No, Natalie.
Okay.
You had when we had spoke yesterday. You had sent me something. The most deranged people are judicial and legal academics. These are the people who they've never tried a case in their life. They've never had a client. They live in this lofty world of I don't know where. And they say things that make absolutely no sense. And we were talking about one in particular, where these judges, specifically Samantha Power's husband, Cass Sunstein, remember years ago, this cognitive infiltration, where he, as a law professor, along with another Judge Rule, came up with this idea in almost a law review program, suggested that the government should actually infiltrate in order to stop conspiracy theories, to go into chat rooms and to supply basically misinformation. This is from a law professor. This is Samantha Power's husband, who, by the way, is going to have to explain. Well, she's
they do that.
Oh, yes. And also, I want to hear, while we're on this subject, where'd you get that $30 or $40 million from? Where'd that come from? So this is going to be the least of their problems, this particular Doge case. Let me say something. In my career of doing this for 8 years professionally from talk radio, I can't keep track of everything that's going on every 5 minutes. Can you?
Yeah.
Just as you post something, it's over with. That's old news. It's at a breakneck speed, and I love it.
I know we went from plastic straws to ending aid in Ukraine to getting people FEMA housing in North Carolina to, you can't keep up with it.
And Google is taking down gay and DEI and black pride. Google!
Yeah.
Google!
Yeah, what?
I know. It's wild. Okay, here's a question also that I see screamed a lot on X, that the power of the purse is only with Congress, and Trump does not have the power to squeeze budgets, shrink any government agency. What does the Constitution say about that? What is the ultimate authority?
Well, of course he can do that. And by the way, let me add something, which is another little thing here. Of course the president can. You mean to tell me the president has no say over the FBI, CIA, the military? Yes, there is funding by virtue of Congress, but as long as the president does not directly overrule something that Congress has provided for, he's within his purview. So, but let me throw in another one, and I want everybody to grasp this. You know how we got into the deep state, the police state, intel state, shadow government, ruling class? Ladies and gentlemen, meet the administrative state. This is what we have been afraid of since the days of FDR, where I, as a corrupt government, say, I can't do this, but I can appoint USAID, a bureaucratic behemoth that can do whatever it wants with plenary power, no constitutional consideration whatsoever, no oversight, and I can say, oh, I'm sorry, it's not me, it's FEMA, it's USAID. The same way that the government used Twitter and other social media platforms to quash and to limit your free speech so that the government could say, oh, no, it's not us. This is a private entity. oh, no, this is an agency. Oh, no, it's not us. This is going to be the end of the administrative state. This is something that we have been talking about forever.
I hope so, and I hope it goes as far as these NGOs as well, these non-governmental organizations that get all of this phony money that's funneled through the bureaucratic administrative state to Catholic charities, the Hebrew International Aid Society, all of these corrupt NGOs that were involved in child sex trafficking operations and everything else that you and I have been paying for, by the way. Lionel from Lionel Nation, always great to see you. It's constitutional. I guess that's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Constitutional.
And it's the way you're describing it like a fly in the ointment. The way I see it on X is like a sledgehammer. So we just have to get through it. We just have to let it play itself out, I guess.
Texas GM in our chat says, I'm part of Lionel Nation. We love this guy. We love Lionel. Lionel, great to see you. Thank you, Lionel. Great to see you as always. Thanks so much, Lionel.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's good to know. I mean, I know they're going to hand wring all they want. They're going to play lawfare, and Trump just keeps going. You know what's funny? I saw an old interview that just surfaced over the past few days with Trump from back in the 1990s, and it was with my old boss at Fox News, Roger Ailes. Oh. Roger, I guess before my time at Fox, used to host his own show on Fox. It was like a weekend talk show, I think.
Okay.
And he sat down with Trump and did an interview, and he said, I want to give you a compliment. He's like, I've known you for good times and bad times. He's like, and there's no difference with you. You're the same person, and you just keep going. And he's like, well, thank you. That was a nice compliment.
That's because he's not a woman.
He's like, what does that mean? He's like, I just keep going.
Speaking for myself.
You're like, I'm going to say.
Am I that consistent? No, I'm not.
But Trump is like, I'm just going to keep going. He's like, you face all this adversity. That's all you got to do. That's what life's all about. You just keep going. And he's like, you learn who your loyal friends are. You learn who they're not, but you just got to keep going. And I love that about the guy. I think that's a powerful thing. So, all right. Hey, we got a daily newsletter. And we have a store. We should tell you about our store, a Redacted store, if you'd like to come over and support independent journalism. We are not paid by Big Pharma. We are not paid by the military-industrial complex. We are independent, and we're supported by you and the very few sponsors we have here on the show. And if you want to help us out here and you get some great Redacted merch, just go to redactedstore.com. And thanks to the millions of you, we just cracked a new record of millions of subscribers, and we just cracked the 2.6 million on YouTube. So thank you guys to the millions of you around the world who watch our show. When we're at the airport or other places, many of you will come up and say hello, and we always love seeing Redacted viewers. So our job here is just to seek the truth. We don't have all the answers, but we're not in the tank for any one party. We believe it's a uniparty and all of these corrupt politicians. So we are trying to navigate the truth with you as best we can here.
All right. Well, we will be back here tomorrow. News is, like Lionel said, breaknecking pace.
Yes.
But we still have our necks so far, and we're going to do this as long as we are able. So be here tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.